Horrifying. A man is willing to burn down an entire criminal empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars, just because of one fleeting glance through rain-streaked car windows. He once abandoned the woman when she was carrying 4 tiny lives inside her. 8 years later, he sees her gaunt soaked, pushing a grocery cart worth a few dollars, while 4 children who look exactly like him shiver in raincoats that are already too small. And in that single moment, Vincent Russo, the man who once made the entire underworld bow, feels his heart ripped into pieces. He whispers, voice shattered, "I killed their lives with my own hands, and now I'd rather die for real than let them suffer through one more single day." Do you dare to hear the rest of the story about a man who used to be a monster, but is now ready to kneel down to redeem the love he himself buried? Before we dive into this chilling and mysterious story, please remember to subscribe to the channel Alex Truths and like this video. Every subscription, like, and share from you is a huge spiritual gift and an incredibly profound source of motivation for the channel's growth, so we can continue bringing wonderful videos every day to everyone. There would be no greater joy than receiving your love and support through the comments you leave right below this video. Comments sharing your emotions or telling us which province or city you're living and working in while listening to this story. Alright, let's continue together and immerse ourselves in this amazing, captivating story that's filled with deep emotions. The rain came down in sheets that October afternoon in 2025. The kind of cold, relentless autumn rain that soaks through every layer and reminds you how thin the barrier is between skin and suffering. Emily Harper walked with her head bowed against it, the hood of her frayed gray sweatshirt already sodden and useless. Her sneakers, once white, now the color of old asphalt, slapped through shallow puddles that never quite drained. Behind her, the 4 little boys held hands in a tight, shivering chain, Ethan leading, then Noah, Caleb, and Liam bringing up the rear. Their matching navy raincoats, bought secondhand from the church basement sale last spring, were too small now, sleeves riding high on thin wrists. They had just left the food pantry on Maple Street. The line had been longer than usual. The new cutoff rules meant families with children over 6 were last. By the time Emily reached the front, the volunteers were scraping the bottom of the last crate. 4 small bags of dented cans, a half loaf of bread already beginning to mold at the edges, a single carton of expired milk, and a package of off-brand ramen. Enough for maybe 3 days if she stretched it. She had smiled at the woman handing out the bags, thanked her softly voice, barely above a whisper, because that was what you did. You thanked people even when what they gave you wasn't enough to keep the hunger from waking the children at 3 in the morning. Now the 5 of them moved slowly along the cracked sidewalk of Elmwood Avenue, the poorest stretch of the old mill town of Milford, upstate New York. Boarded windows stared down at them like empty eyes. A faded for-lease sign flapped in the wind outside what used to be the corner pharmacy. Emily's arms ached from the weight of the grocery bags looped over her wrists. She had learned long ago not to carry them against her chest. The plastic cut into her skin less when they dangled. Inside her head, the familiar litany looped like a prayer she no longer believed. 1 foot, then the other. Keep them moving, keep them dry, keep them alive. She didn't see the black Cadillac Escalade until it eased to a stop at the red light ahead. The vehicle was so out of place it might as well have dropped from the sky. Polished obsidian paint-tinted windows dark enough to swallow light custom rims that gleamed even in the rain. No one in Milford drove anything like that. Not anymore. Emily kept walking, eyes down, shoulders hunched. She had learned to make herself small around expensive things. Rich people didn't like to be reminded that poverty existed in the same zip code. But the boys noticed. Mommy, Ethan whispered, tugging her coat. That car's real shiny. She glanced up just for a second, and the world tilted. Through the rain-streaked glass of the passenger window she saw him. Vincent Russo, Vinny. The same sharp jawline, the same piercing hazel eyes that used to look at her like she was the only thing worth seeing. 8 years older, yes lines carved deeper around his mouth, silver threading the dark hair at his temples, but unmistakably him. He sat in the backseat posture, straight expensive charcoal coat open over a crisp white shirt. A woman beside him, sleek blonde hair, red lipstick, designer sunglasses perched on her head even in the rain, leaned close, laughing at something on her phone. Emily's knees buckled. She caught herself on the shopping cart handle, breath coming in shallow, painful bursts. The boys pressed closer, sensing the change in her the way animals sense an approaching storm. Mommy Noah's voice was small, uncertain. You okay? She couldn't answer, couldn't breathe. The cold rain suddenly felt scalding against her cheeks. Vinny. Here. Now. After 8 years of silence, after the night he walked out with nothing but a duffel bag and a promise he'd send money when he made it. After she discovered she was pregnant, 4 heartbeats on the ultrasound screen, 4 tiny lives depending on a woman who could barely keep herself fed. After the rumors he'd believed without question. After the nights she'd cried herself hollow, wondering if he was dead or simply didn't care. And now he was sitting in a car that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life, laughing with a beautiful woman, while Emily's children wore shoes with holes in the soles. The light changed. The Escalade began to move. Emily forced her legs to work. One step, another. Keep moving, don't look back. But she looked. She couldn't help it. And in that instant, through the tinted glass, their eyes met. Vinny's face went white. The Escalade jerked to a stop again right there in the middle of the intersection, ignoring the green light. Horns blared behind it. The driver's window rolled down. A man in a dark suit leaned out, waving an apology. Vinny was already moving. He threw open the back door and stepped into the rain without hesitation. No umbrella, no coat buttoned, just him, tall, broad-shouldered, radiating the kind of authority that made strangers step aside. Emily. Her name in his mouth sounded like a wound reopening. She took an instinctive step backward, pulling the boys behind her. The cart rattled. A can of green beans slipped from one of the bags and rolled into the gutter. He took another step closer. She shook her head, small, frantic. "Don't." The single word came out cracked, barely audible over the rain. Vinny stopped. Rain plastered his hair to his forehead. His eyes, those eyes she used to trust with her whole heart, were wide with something raw and terrible. Recognition, horror, guilt, and something else. Something that looked dangerously close to hunger. "Emily," he said again, softer. "The boys." He looked at them, really looked. 4 identical faces staring back at him. Same hazel eyes, same dark brows, same stubborn set to the jaw. 4 little mirrors of the man he'd been before money and power had sharpened every edge. Ethan stepped forward, chin lifted, protective, in the way only the oldest of quadruplets could be. "Who are you?" he demanded. Vinny's throat worked. He crouched slowly, bringing himself to their level, palms open. His voice broke. "I'm someone who knew your mom a long time ago." Emily's heart slammed against her ribs so hard she thought it might crack them. She wanted to scream, to run, to claw at his perfect coat and ask why now, why here, why when. She had finally learned how to survive without him. Instead, she whispered, "Please, just go." The blonde woman Sophia Emily would learn later had stepped out of the car now, heels clicking on wet pavement, arms crossed. "Vinny, what the hell is this?" she snapped. "We're going to be late." He didn't even glance at her. His gaze never left Emily's face. "I didn't know," he said hoarsely. "I swear to God, Emily, I didn't know." She laughed, a small, bitter sound that tasted like blood. "You didn't want to know." The words hung between them like smoke. Rain drummed on the cart, on the boys' hoods, on the expensive black car idling in the intersection. Caleb coughed a thin, wet sound that made Emily's stomach drop. She dropped to her knees immediately, heedless of the puddle cupping his small face. "Baby, breathe slow." "Mama's here." Vinny watched the scene, watched her thin hands tremble, watched the way she tried to shield all 4 boys at once with her own body, and something inside him tore open. 8 years of carefully constructed armor, money, fear control, cracked like cheap glass. He stepped forward again. This time she didn't back away. She simply looked up at him through the rain eyes, huge and exhausted and terrified. And in that moment, Vinny Russo, the man who had stared down rival bosses without flinching, felt something he hadn't felt since he was 23 years old and still believed love could save him. He felt love. Not soft, not gentle, fierce, violent, consuming. A love that roared through every vein, every bone, every scar, screaming that he had thrown away the only thing that ever truly mattered. And he knew with the certainty of a man who had stared death in the face more times than he could count that he would burn his entire empire to ash before he let her walk away again. But Emily didn't see any of that. All she saw was the man who had once promised her forever now standing in front of her wearing a coat that cost more than 10 years of her rent. All she felt was the old familiar terror. The terror of hoping, because hope, she had learned the hard way, was the cruelest thing of all. The rain did not relent. It hammered the roof of the black Cadillac Escalade like fists, demanding entry, each drop a reminder of everything Vincent Russo had tried to leave behind. Inside the warm leather cocoon of the car, the world felt distant, muted. The heater purred softly. The scent of Sophia's expensive perfume, something floral and sharp, mixed with the faint leather polish of the interior. Vinny sat motionless, staring through the streaked glass at the small, drenched family that had just passed. 4 boys, 4 identical faces, 4 small bodies pressed close to a woman whose silhouette he would have recognized in total darkness. Emily. His heart gave one violent, painful thud, then seemed to stop altogether. Sophia glanced over from the seat beside him, frowning at his sudden stillness. "Vinny, what's wrong? "You look like you've seen a ghost." He didn't answer. Couldn't. The driver, Marco, loyal since the early days, had already stopped the vehicle in the middle of the intersection. Horns blared behind them, angry and impatient. Marco rolled down the window, raising a hand in apology, but his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, watching his boss. Vinny's hand moved before his mind caught up. He threw open the door. Cold rain slapped him across the face the moment he stepped out. It soaked through the fine wool of his charcoal overcoat in seconds, but he felt nothing. Not the chill. Not the water streaming down his collar. Nothing, except the pull in his chest, sharp, brutal, like a hook lodged behind his ribs. He walked toward her. Emily had frozen mid-step when their eyes met through the glass. Now she stood, rooted to the cracked sidewalk, one hand gripping the handle of the rusty shopping cart so tightly her knuckles blanched white. The 4 boys clustered behind her like frightened ducklings, rain dripping from their hoods, small faces, pale and watchful. Vinny stopped 10 feet away, close enough to see the hollows under her eyes. Close enough to see how thin she had become, cheekbones, sharp collarbones, stark beneath the threadbare sweatshirt. Close enough to see the tremor in her shoulders that had nothing to do with the cold. "Emily," he said again. His voice cracked on the second syllable. She flinched. The smallest boy, Caleb, though Vinny didn't know the names yet, coughed again, a wet, rattling sound that sliced through the rain. Emily dropped immediately to one knee in the puddle, heedless of the dirty water soaking her jeans, cupping the child's face with shaking hands. "Breathe, baby," she whispered. "Slow. Mama's got you." Vinny watched her, watched the way she tried to shield all 4 children at once with her own body, as though she could keep the rain itself from touching them, and something inside him fractured. 8 years. 8 years of telling himself the story he needed, that she had betrayed him, that she had never really loved him, that walking away had been the only choice. 8 years of building walls of money and power and fear so high he could pretend the past didn't exist. And now the past stood in front of him in a downpour, thin as a reed, protecting 4 children who looked exactly like the boy he had once been. He took another step. Emily's head snapped up. Her eyes, those same soft gray eyes he used to fall asleep staring into, were wide with something between terror and disbelief. "Don't," she said again, softer this time, almost pleading. "Please, Vinny, just go." The sound of his name in her mouth after all these years nearly brought him to his knees. Behind him, Sophia stepped out of the Escalade, heels clicking sharply against wet pavement. She crossed her arms, red lips pursed. "Vinny, seriously. What is this? We're blocking traffic. And I'm getting soaked." He didn't look at her. His gaze never left Emily. "I didn't know," he said hoarsely. Rain streamed down his face into his eyes. He didn't blink. "I swear on my life, Emily. I didn't know." Her laugh was small, broken. "You didn't want to know." The words landed like a blade between his ribs. He deserved them. He deserved every syllable. Ethan, the boy who had spoken first, stepped forward again, chin lifted in that stubborn way that made Vinny's throat close. "Who are you?" he asked again, louder this time. "Why do you know our mom, Vinny?" Crouched slowly, palms open, rain pooling in the creases of his expensive coat. His voice failed him for a moment. He swallowed. Tried again. "I'm someone who used to be very important to your mom. A long time ago." Emily made a small, wounded sound. Liam, the quietest one, peeked out from behind his brothers. "Are you the bad man?" he asked in a whisper. The question landed like a gunshot. Vinny closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they were wet and not from the rain. "I was," he said quietly. "I was the worst kind of man." Sophia laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "Okay, this is ridiculous. Vinny, get back in the car. We're late for dinner with the Morettas." Vinny's jaw tightened. He stood slowly, turning just enough to look at her. "Get in the car, Sophia," he said. His voice was low, calm, dangerous. She blinked. "Excuse me," I said, "get in the car." For the first time since they'd started dating 2 years ago, Sophia saw something in his eyes. She didn't recognize, something raw, something ancient, something that had nothing to do with her. She opened her mouth, closed it. Then, lips pressed into a thin line, she turned and stalked back to the Escalade. Vinny turned back to Emily. She was still on her knees in the puddle, holding Caleb against her chest, rocking him gently, while the other 3 boys pressed close. The shopping cart had tipped slightly. A can of soup rolled slowly into the gutter and vanished down a storm drain. Emily watched it go with a look of such exhausted defeat that Vinny felt the air leave his lungs. He stepped forward again. This time she didn't tell him to stop. She simply looked up at him, rain dripping from her lashes, face pale, eyes huge, and whispered, "Why now?" The question was so soft it almost dissolved in the rain. Vinny crouched once more, close enough to see the faint freckles across her nose that he used to trace with his fingertip. close enough to smell the faint scent of discount shampoo and wet cotton that clung to her. "Because I just saw what I threw away," he said. Emily's breath hitched. She looked away quickly, blinking hard. "I can't do this," she whispered. I can't let you back in. Not after everything. I know. I have nothing left to give you, Vinny. Nothing. You don't have to give me anything." She laughed again, that same, small, shattered sound. "You say that now." Caleb coughed once more, harder this time. Emily's entire body tensed. Vinny moved without thinking. He shrugged out of his overcoat, still warm from the car's heater, and draped it around her shoulders. The wool was heavy, expensive, the lining silk. It dwarfed her thin frame. Emily stiffened. The boys stared at the coat like it was made of gold. She started to shrug it off. "Please," Vinny said quietly. "Just for the boys. They're freezing." Her hands trembled. She looked at the 4 small faces, cheeks flushed from cold lips, faintly blue, and slowly, painfully pulled the coat tighter around them. Vinny watched the gesture and felt something inside him tear wide open. Love. Not the soft, nostalgic thing he remembered from their youth. This was something darker, hungrier, more violent. A love that roared through every scar, every regret, every ruthless decision he'd made since the night he walked away. A love that promised destruction to anyone that tried to take her from him again. He reached out slowly, very slowly, and brushed a wet strand of hair from her cheek. Emily flinched, but she didn't pull away. Their eyes met again. In hers he saw exhaustion, fear, grief, and the tiniest, most fragile flicker of something else. Curiosity, hope, the most dangerous thing of all. Behind them, tires screeched. A black SUV, different from Vinny's, pulled up sharply at the curb. 2 men stepped out. Dark suits, hard faces. One of them carried a visible bulge under his jacket. Rossi family muscle. Vinny's body tensed instantly, old instincts rising like a blade. The taller one, Gino called out, voice carrying over the rain. "Boss says you're late, Vinny. And he don't like waiting." Vinny didn't look away from Emily. "Tell him I'll be there when I'm there," he said. Quiet. Final. Gino's eyes narrowed. He glanced at Emily, at the children, at the coat draped around them, and something ugly flickered across his face. "Looks like you got yourself a little situation here," he said. "Need help cleaning it up?" Emily's arms tightened around the boys. Vinny stepped in front of her, shielding her without touching her. "Walk away, Gino," he said softly, "while you still can." The 2 men exchanged glances. Then slowly they backed toward their vehicle, but the threat lingered in the air like smoke. Emily's voice, small, trembling, came from behind him. "You're still in it," she whispered. "The life. The danger." Vinny turned back to her. "I'm trying to get out," he said. "For you. For them." She looked at him for a long moment, rain dripping from her lashes, heart visible in her eyes. Then she whispered the words that nearly destroyed him. "I don't know if I can believe you anymore." And with that, she straightened slowly, thin, soaked, exhausted, and began pushing the cart again. 1 step, then another. Vinny watched her go. Watched the way she hunched her shoulders against the wind. Watched the way the boys stayed close to her, small hands clutching the hem of his coat. He stood in the rain alone, now coatless, heart pounding with a violence he hadn't felt in years. Love, remorse, rage, they burned through him like wildfire. And he knew with absolute certainty that he would tear the world apart before he let her disappear into the rain again. The rain kept falling heavier now, as though the sky itself had decided to wash away the years that separated them. Emily pushed the shopping cart forward, 1 trembling step at a time, the rusted wheels squeaking in protest against the uneven sidewalk. Her arms burned from the weight of the plastic bags. The thin handles had already carved red grooves into her palms. Behind her, the 4 boys walked in a tight cluster, small shoes splashing through puddles that reflected the gray October sky of 2025. Vinny followed. Not close enough to touch, not far enough to disappear. Each step he took felt like a confession he had never spoken aloud. Emily could sense him there, felt the weight of his presence like heat at her back. She wanted to run, wanted to scream, wanted to turn and demand answers she had stopped hoping for long ago. Instead, she kept moving, head down, breath shallow, heart hammering so hard it hurt her ribs. The boys kept glancing back. Ethan's small face was set in stubborn lines, but his eyes were wide with questions he didn't dare ask. Noah clutched the hem of Emily's sweatshirt with white-knuckled fingers. Caleb coughed again, smaller now, but still wet and worrying. Liam simply stared at the tall man in the expensive shirt who walked behind them like a shadow that refused to fade. They reached the corner of Elmwood and Pine, where the sidewalk dipped into a deep standing puddle that had swallowed the curb for months. No one had fixed it. No one ever fixed anything in this part of Milford. Emily hesitated. The cart would bog down. The boys' sneakers would fill with water. Another small misery stacked on top of 1,000 others. Before she could decide, Vinny moved. He stepped around them, swift, silent, and placed one polished leather shoe into the deepest part of the puddle. Then another. He bent, gripped the cart handle beside her hands, and pushed. The cart rolled smoothly through. Emily froze. His sleeve brushed hers warm wool against cold-soaked cotton. She jerked back as though burned. "Don't," she whispered. The word came out cracked, barely audible. Vinny didn't look at her. He kept pushing until they were on the other side, then stepped back, hands loose at his sides, rain dripping from his rolled-up cuffs. "I'm not asking for anything," he said quietly. "Just let me get you home." Home. The word landed like a slap. Emily's laugh was small, bitter, exhausted. "Home," she repeated. Her voice trembled. "You want to see home?" She turned the cart sharply toward the narrow alley that led to Carver Street, the shortest way back to the crumbling duplex she rented for far more than it was worth. Vinny followed. He had no choice. The love that had ignited in his chest the moment he saw her face through the rain-streaked glass was burning hotter now, fierce, consuming, almost painful. It warred with the guilt that clawed at his throat, the remorse that made every breath feel like broken glass. He wanted to drop to his knees in the filthy water and beg forgiveness. He wanted to wrap her in his coat again and never let go. He wanted to destroy anything that had ever made her suffer. Instead, he walked behind her, silent, soaked heart tearing itself apart. They reached the row of sagging houses on Carver Street. Number 17 was the worst of them. Peeling gray paint, one window boarded with cardboard. Front steps cracked and uneven. A single bulb burned weakly behind the torn curtain in the living room window. The landlord had promised to fix the heat before winter. That promise had been made last January. Emily stopped at the bottom of the steps. She turned slowly. The four boys pressed close to her legs, eyes huge, taking in the tall stranger who had followed them all the way home. Vinny stood 3 feet away, rain streaming down his face, white dress shirt plastered to his broad chest, revealing the hard lines of muscle beneath. Emily looked at him, really looked. At the expensive watch on his wrist, at the way his shoes still gleamed despite the mud, at the way he stood like a man who commanded rooms full of dangerous people, and yet here he was, soaked and silent, waiting for her to speak. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. Her voice was polite, almost timid, the way she spoke to the older volunteers at the pantry, the way she spoke to anyone who held power over her life. "I know," Vinny answered. "Then why are you—" "Because I can't walk away again." The honesty in his voice startled her. She looked down at the boys. Ethan stepped forward again, brave, protective, too young to understand how much courage it took. "You made Mommy cry," he said. His small voice shook. "A long time ago," she told us. Vinny's face crumpled for a fraction of a second before he forced it back into control. "I did," he said quietly. "And I'll carry that shame until the day I die." Emily's breath caught. She hadn't expected that. She hadn't expected any of this. Across the street, tires crunched on wet gravel. Another black SUV, this one with tinted windows and New York plates, slowed to a crawl. The passenger window rolled down just enough for Emily to see the hard profile of a man she didn't recognize. Vinny's body shifted, subtle, protective, placing himself between them and the vehicle. The man in the SUV stared for a long moment. Then the window rose again. The vehicle pulled away slowly. Emily's heart stuttered. "You're still in danger," she whispered. "You bring it with you." Vinny's jaw tightened. "I'm trying to end it," he said. "I've been trying for years." She shook her head, slow, exhausted. "I can't let them," she gestured to the boys, "anywhere near that world. I would never—" "You already did," she cut in. Her voice cracked. "You left us in it." The words sliced through him. He took a step closer, careful, slow. Emily didn't retreat this time. She simply stood there, thin shoulders, trembling, rain dripping from the ends of her hair, eyes locked on his. "I believed a lie," Vinny said hoarsely. "I believed you betrayed me. I let pride and anger and fear turn me into someone I don't even recognize anymore." Emily's lips trembled. "You didn't even ask," she whispered. "You just left." "I know. I waited for you," she said so softly he almost missed it. "For months, I stood at the bus station with a bag packed for 3 people who didn't exist yet. I waited until the last bus left. Then I walked home alone." Vinny closed his eyes. The image tore through him. Emily, young, pregnant, alone, on a cold bench waiting for a man who never came. When he opened his eyes again, they were wet. "I'm so sorry," he said. The words sounded small, inadequate, but they were all he had. Emily looked away. A gust of wind whipped down the street, rattling the loose boards on the porch. Caleb coughed again, harder. Emily dropped to one knee immediately, heedless of the mud cupping his small face. Baby inside. Now. She straightened too quickly and swayed. Vinny moved without thought. His arm went around her waist, steady, warm, careful. She stiffened, but she didn't pull away. For one long, suspended moment, they stood like that rain falling around them, 4 small boys watching. Wide-eyed, the world narrowed to the space between their bodies. Emily's voice came out small, trembling. I'm so tired, Vinny. The confession slipped out like a secret she had guarded for years. He felt it like a physical blow. I know, he whispered. I see it. She looked up at him, then really looked. Saw the torment in his eyes. Saw the way his hand trembled where it rested on her waist. Saw the man who had once promised her forever now standing in front of her, stripped bare by remorse. And something inside her cracked just a little. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the first tiny splinter of possibility. Behind them, another vehicle slowed at the corner. Vinny's head turned sharply. This time it was a sleek gray sedan, 2 men inside watching. He tightened his hold on Emily, protective, instinctive. Go inside, he said quietly. Lock the door. I'll make sure they leave. She hesitated. Then slowly she nodded. She turned toward the steps, boys clustered around her like ducklings. At the top she paused, looked back. Vinny stood in the rain, coatless, soaked eyes burning with something fierce and unshakable. Vinny, she said softly. He waited. Don't get hurt, she whispered. It was the smallest thing. But it was everything. He nodded, once sharp, solemn. Then he turned toward the gray sedan. The engine revved. Vinny stepped into the street alone, unarmed, but carrying the full weight of a love that had just remembered how to burn. And in that moment, Emily understood something terrifying. He wasn't going to walk away. Not this time. Not ever again. The door of the duplex closed behind Emily with a soft, defeated click. She leaned against it for a long moment. Forehead pressed to the chipped paint, eyes squeezed shut. The boys had already scattered inside Ethan, leading the way to the tiny kitchen, Noah and Liam trailing. Caleb still clinging to her leg, until she knelt and kissed his damp forehead. Their voices were hushed, now small and uncertain, as though they sensed the storm that had followed them home. Outside, the rain continued its merciless drumming. Vinny stood on the cracked sidewalk, soaked through, staring at the door as though it were the entrance to a life he had once been promised. His white shirt clung transparently to his chest, revealing the hard lines of muscle earned through years of control and violence. Water streamed from his dark hair, tracing cold paths down his neck. But he felt none of it. The only cold he registered was the one blooming deep in his chest, a gnawing, relentless ache that had no name but felt like dying. He should leave. He knew that. Every instinct, honed by years in the shadows, screamed at him to walk away, to protect her from the danger he carried like a second skin. Yet his feet refused to move. The love that had awakened in him the moment he saw her face through the rain, now burned with such ferocity it threatened to consume him whole. It was not gentle. It was not patient. It was a wildfire fed by 8 years of regret, remorse so deep it felt like a blade twisting in his ribs, guilt so violent it made his hands tremble. Across the street, the gray sedan had returned. It idled at the curb, now engine low and menacing. 2 men inside watched him openly, no pretense, no subtlety. Vinny recognized the passenger, Frankie the Knife Moretti, one of the Rossi family's enforcers. A man who had never forgiven Vinny for rising above the street-level work while they stayed mired in it. Vinny turned slowly toward the car. His posture changed, shoulders squared, jaw set, the powerful man who commanded fear without raising his voice. The driver's window lowered. Frankie leaned out, rain dripping from the brim of his flat cap. You got a problem, Vinny, he called. Looks like you're distracted. Vinny's voice was calm, almost conversational. I'm handling personal business. Frankie's lips curled. Personal business don't look like it belongs on this street. Vinny took 1 step forward. Then drive on. The tension stretched thin and sharp like a wire ready to snap. Inside the house, Emily heard the voices. She froze in the narrow hallway, one hand on Caleb's back as he coughed again. The sound of Vinny's voice, low, steady, dangerous, cut through the thin walls like a knife. She moved to the window. Through the gap in the torn curtain, she saw him standing alone in the rain, facing down the black car body coiled with quiet menace. Her heart gave a painful lurch. Fear, confusion, and something else, something she refused to name. A soft knock came at the back door. Emily startled. She ushered the boys into the single bedroom, the only room with a lock, and cracked the door open just enough to see. Miss Clara stood on the back stoop umbrella, sagging under the weight of the rain. She was 78, thin as a reed, hair white as cotton, eyes sharp behind thick glasses. She had run the corner diner for 40 years, before arthritis forced her to retire. Now she spent her days watching the neighborhood from her porch, offering coffee to anyone who looked like they needed it. She looked at Emily with the gentle wisdom of someone who had seen too much suffering. "Child," she said softly, "there's a man out front who looks like he's about to tear himself apart." Emily's throat tightened. "I know." Miss Clara stepped closer, lowering her voice. "He's Vincent Russo. The Vincent Russo. Word travels fast in Milford. They say he's the biggest thing to come out of this town since the mills closed." Emily looked down at her bare feet, cold cracked nails, chipped from months of wearing shoes too small. "I used to love him," she whispered. Miss Clara reached out and touched her arm, light steady. "And he loved you. I remember. Saw you two walking hand in hand down Main Street when you were barely 20. You glowed, Emily. Like the sun lived inside you." Emily's eyes filled. "That was a long time ago." Miss Clara nodded slowly. "Time don't erase what was real. It just buries it under a lot of hurt." She glanced toward the front of the house. "That man out there, he's carrying more guilt than any one soul should bear. I saw it in his eyes when he looked at you and those boys. He's drowning in it." Emily pressed her lips together. "He left me," she said. Her voice broke. "I was pregnant. 4 babies. Alone. The nights I spent crying on that bathroom floor, too scared to eat because I couldn't keep anything down, too poor to buy more than 1 meal a day. He wasn't there." Miss Clara's eyes softened with sorrow. "I know, baby. I know." She paused. "But he's here now." Emily shook her head, slow, exhausted. "And what does that change? He still brings danger. Look at him, standing out there like he owns the street. That car across the way, they're watching him. They're watching us." Miss Clara sighed. "Men like him, they live in 2 worlds, the one they built with blood and money, and the one they lost when they walked away from love." She squeezed Emily's arm gently. "But love don't die easy, child. Not when it's the real kind." Outside, Vinny still stood in the rain. Frankie's car hadn't moved. Vinny's voice carried through the storm, low final. "Last chance, Frankie. Drive away." Frankie laughed, a short, ugly sound. "You think you can just walk back in here, play house, and the families forget? You're soft now, Vinny. Soft gets you killed." Vinny's smile was cold. "Try me." The tension snapped like dry wood. The driver's door opened. The second man stepped out, taller, broader hand resting near his hip. Vinny didn't flinch. He simply waited. Inside, Emily's breath caught. She moved without thinking, crossing the small living room, opening the front door just a crack. "Vinny," she called. Her voice was small, trembling. "Please." He turned at the sound of her voice. Their eyes met across the rain-soaked yard. In that instant, everything else vanished. The rival car, the danger, the years of separation. There was only her thin, exhausted, standing in the doorway, wrapped in his coat, looking at him with eyes full of fear and something deeper, something that looked dangerously like hope. Vinny's heart gave one violent, shattering thud. The love inside him roared louder than the storm. It was savage, protective, unforgiving toward anyone who threatened her. He turned back to Frankie. "Last warning," he said quietly. "Leave, or I make this personal." Frankie stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly the car reversed. It disappeared down the street. Vinny exhaled once sharply. He walked up the steps. Emily didn't move. He stopped just outside the door, close enough to see the way her hands trembled, close enough to see the exhaustion etched into every line of her face, close enough to smell the faint scent of rain and desperation that clung to her. "I'm not asking to come in," he said softly. Emily looked up at him. Her voice came out small, almost polite, the voice of a woman who had spent years speaking carefully to people who could hurt her. "Then why are you here?" Vinny swallowed. "Because I can't breathe knowing you're cold, hungry, scared. Because those boys," his voice cracked, "they're mine, and I left them to suffer." Emily's eyes filled. She looked away quickly, blinking hard. "I survived," she whispered. "We survived." "I know," he said, "and that kills me more than anything." Silence stretched between them, thick, heavy, full of unspoken pain. Miss Clara appeared behind Emily, umbrella folded. She looked at Vinny with calm, knowing eyes. "You hurt her once," she said simply. "You do it again, and you'll answer to more than just your conscience." Vinny nodded once, slow, solemn. "I understand." Miss Clara turned to Emily. "Let him sit on the porch if you need to, child. But don't let him in until you're ready." She squeezed Emily's shoulder gently, then slipped past her into the rain, heading home. Emily looked at Vinny again. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't trust you. I know. I don't know if I ever will. I know that too." She studied him, rain dripping from his lashes, powerful body trembling not from cold but from something far deeper. Then softly she said, "But I don't want you to get hurt either." Vinny closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were wet. "Thank you," he whispered. Emily stepped back. She didn't invite him in, but she didn't close the door either. She simply stood there, thin, weary-guarded, and watched him sit on the top step, rain pouring over him like penance. And in the quiet that followed, something cracked open inside her. Not wide. Not yet. But enough for the smallest sliver of light to slip through. While across the street, another car idled in the shadows, watching, waiting, planning. The storm wasn't over. It had only just begun. The porch light flickered once, twice, then steadied into a weak yellow glow that barely reached the bottom step. Vinny sat motionless in the rain, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles stood white against the dark. Water ran in steady rivulets down his back, soaking through the silk of his shirt, until it felt like a second colder skin. He did not move, did not speak. He simply waited for what he did not know. Forgiveness, understanding. A door that might never open again. Inside the house, Emily moved through the familiar ritual of survival. She peeled off the sodden sweatshirt, his coat still wrapped around her shoulders like a borrowed armor, and hung it over the back of the single wooden chair. The living room was small, almost suffocating, one sagging couch with springs that poked through the fabric, a coffee table scarred with crayon marks and water rings, a television that only received 3 channels when the antenna was angled. Just right. The air smelled of damp plaster and the faint metallic tang of old pipes. She knelt beside the boys who had gathered on the threadbare rug like small birds huddling against winter. "Let's get you dry," she murmured. She pulled off their wet shoes, first soles worn so thin she could see the outline of their toes through the rubber. Socks next damp, mismatched, one with a hole at the big toe. She rubbed each small foot between her palms, until the skin pinked again, whispering soft nonsense words the way she had done every cold night for 7 years. Caleb's cough rattled again, deeper, now wetter. Emily's heart seized. She lifted him into her lap, rocking slowly, pressing her cheek to his damp hair. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered. "Mama's trying." Across the room, the kitchen light buzzed faintly. One bare bulb. No shade. The refrigerator hummed, half empty its contents, barely enough for breakfast tomorrow, a quarter carton of milk, 3 eggs, the last slices of bread already beginning to harden at the edges. She had not eaten since yesterday's lunch, a single peanut butter sandwich shared 5 ways. The hunger was an old companion now. Familiar. Almost comforting in its constancy. It reminded her she was still alive. Outside, Vinny lifted his head. He could see her silhouette through the thin curtain, moving slowly, carefully, like someone who had learned that sudden movements cost too much energy. Each motion spoke of exhaustion so profound it had become part of her bones. The guilt inside him rose like bile. He pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes until stars burst behind the lids. How many nights had she sat like this alone, rocking a crying child, wondering if tomorrow would bring food or another empty cupboard? How many mornings had she woken before dawn, stomach cramping, counting pennies for bus fare to the pantry? How many times had she looked at those 4 identical faces and seen him, seen the man who had promised to stand beside her and then vanished? The front door creaked open. Emily stood framed in the doorway, wrapped in his coat, hair still dripping, eyes shadowed with fatigue. She did not invite him in. She simply looked at him. "You're still here?" she said softly. The words held no warmth, only quiet surprise. Vinny rose slowly, water sluicing off his clothes. "I told you," he said. "I can't walk away." She studied him for a long moment. Then in a voice so soft it nearly dissolved, "Come inside. Just for a minute. The boys. They're asking questions." He stepped over the threshold carefully as though the floor might give way beneath him. The warmth of the small house hit him like a physical blow, not because it was warm, but because it was not. The air was damp, chilled, carrying the faint smell of mildew from walls that had never fully dried after last winter's leaks. The boys stared at him from the rug. Ethan stood in front, arms crossed in unconscious imitation of his mother's protective stance. "You gonna stay?" he asked bluntly. Vinny looked down at his child, and felt the ground shift beneath him. "I want to," he answered honestly. "But that's up to your mom." Emily watched the exchange with a look of quiet devastation. She turned away, busying herself with the kitchen, pulling down the last of the bread and slicing it with trembling hands. Vinny followed her slowly. He stopped in the doorway. The disparity struck him like a fist to the chest. His watch, $20,000 Patek Philippe, gleamed under the bare bulb. His shoes, hand-stitched Italian leather, left faint wet prints on the peeling linoleum. His cufflinks, solid gold, caught the light when he moved. And here she stood, cutting bread with a knife that had lost its edge years ago, hands cracked and red from cold water and cheap soap. She felt his gaze. Her shoulders stiffened. "You don't have to look at me like that," she said quietly. "Like what? Like I'm broken?" Vinny's throat closed. "You're not broken," he said. "You're the strongest person I've ever known." She laughed, a small, painful sound. "I don't feel strong." She set the knife down. Her hands shook so badly she had to press them flat against the counter. "I feel tired. I feel scared. I feel like I've been carrying this alone so long I forgot what it feels like to breathe without fear." Vinny took one step closer. He did not touch her. He simply stood there close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, the only warmth in the room. "I should have been here," he said. His voice cracked. "Every night, every cough, every empty cupboard. I should have been here." Emily turned to face him. Tears stood in her eyes, but they did not fall. "You believed them," she whispered. "You believed I cheated. You believed I didn't want you anymore." Vinny's face contorted. "I was a fool," he said. "I was angry. I was scared. And I let other people's lies fill the silence you left when you tried to explain." She stared at him. "I tried to tell you," she said. "I drove to your apartment that night. I stood outside in the snow for 3 hours. I saw the light in your window. I knew you were home. And I still waited." Vinny closed his eyes. The image seared into him. Emily pregnant with quadruplets standing in the freezing dark, waiting for a man too proud to open the door. He felt something inside him break clean through. The remorse was no longer a quiet ache. It was violent. It tore at him like claws. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "God help me, Emily, I'm so sorry." She looked away. Her voice came out small, almost polite, the voice she used when asking for extensions on rent, when apologizing to the boys for another night of soup. "I don't know how to forgive that." "I'm not asking you to," he said immediately. "I'm asking you to let me earn it. One day at a time. One breath at a time." Silence fell again, deep aching. Outside tires crunched once more. Vinny's head snapped toward the window. Another vehicle, different this time. Sleeker. Darker. He moved without thinking, placing himself between Emily and the glass. "Stay here," he said quietly. He stepped onto the porch. The car idled for a long moment. Then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall, lean, wearing a tailored coat that screamed money and menace. Tommy Rossi, second son of the Rossi family. Vinny's voice was ice. "You're a long way from Brooklyn, Tommy." Tommy smiled, thin, dangerous. "Family business, Vinny. You've been distracted. People notice." Vinny took one step down. "I'm handling my business." Tommy's gaze flicked to the house. "Looks like a lot of business for a man who used to run clean." Vinny's fists clenched. "Walk away, Tommy." Tommy laughed softly. "You're going soft. Soft don't survive in our world." Vinny's smile was cold and lethal. "Then test me." Tommy studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded once, slow, deliberate. "This isn't over." He returned to his car. The engine purred. The vehicle disappeared into the rain. Vinny stood there, breathing hard rain, streaming over him. Inside, Emily watched from the window, face pale, eyes wide. When he turned back, she was waiting in the doorway. "You can't stay here," she said softly. "Not like this," Vinny nodded. "I know." But he did not move. He simply looked at her, looked at the woman who had carried his children alone, who had survived on nothing but courage and sheer will. And the love inside him surged again, fierce, protective, all-consuming. It warred with the guilt. It warred with the danger he carried. It warred with everything he had become. And still it burned brighter. "I'll go," he said quietly. "But I'm coming back tomorrow. And the day after, and the day after that. Until you tell me to stop." Emily's breath caught. She looked at him, really looked. Saw the torment in his eyes. Saw the man who had once held her like she was the only thing worth living for. And something inside her shifted just a fraction. Not trust. Not yet. But the first fragile thread of possibility. She nodded once, small, almost imperceptible. Then she closed the door. Vinny stood on the porch for a long moment. Rain poured over him. He felt nothing but the ache in his chest, the violent, tearing certainty that he would spend the rest of his life earning back what he had thrown away. And he would do it. No matter the cost. No matter the blood. No matter the war that was coming. The night deepened into that heavy, breathless quiet that only comes after a storm has exhausted itself. Inside the duplex on Carver Street, the single bulb in the living room had been turned off to save the last bit of electricity. Emily sat on the edge of the sagging couch. Caleb curled against her side, his small chest rising and falling too fast, too shallow. The other 3 boys slept in a tangled heap on the mattress in the corner. Ethan, with one arm thrown protectively over Noah, Liam curled into a tight ball as though trying to disappear into himself. She had not slept, not truly, not in years. The cold seeped through the thin walls, carrying the memory of countless nights when the wind howled through cracks she could never afford to seal. Her body ached, deep, bone-level exhaustion that no amount of rest could cure. Malnutrition had carved hollows beneath her eyes, sharpened the angles of her wrists, until the veins stood out like blue rivers on pale skin. She had learned to ignore the hunger pangs, the dizziness that came when she stood too quickly, the way her legs sometimes trembled under the weight of carrying 4 children and the world on her back. But tonight the cough would not be ignored. Caleb's breathing had grown labored, each inhale a small wet rasp. His forehead burned under her palm. She rocked him gently, whispering the same prayers she had whispered since the day they were born. Please, just one more night. Just let him breathe. The clock on the wall, its hands stuck forever at 9:03, mocked her with its silence. Outside, Vinny had not left. He sat on the top step back against the peeling railing, coatless and soaked through. The rain had stopped, but the cold lingered, biting through wet fabric. He had not moved in hours. His phone, sleek, expensive, silent now, lay forgotten in his pocket. Calls from the city from men who expected answers had gone unanswered. For the first time in years, the Empire waited on him. He waited on her. Inside, Caleb stirred. A small, frightened whimper escaped him. Emily's heart lurched. She lifted him higher, pressing her lips to his fever-hot temple. Shh, baby. Mama's here. But the cough came again, harder, deeper, tearing at his small frame. Panic rose in her throat like bile. She stood too fast. The room tilted. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. She staggered, clutching the back of the couch, one arm wrapped protectively around Caleb. The front door opened without a knock. Vinny stepped inside, silent, swift eyes, scanning the room like a man who had walked into danger 1,000 times. He saw her immediately swaying pale, holding her son as though he might slip away if she loosened her grip. Emily. His voice was low, urgent. She looked up, eyes wide, glassy with exhaustion and fear. He's burning up, she whispered. He can't breathe right. Vinny crossed the room in 3 strides. He reached for Caleb, slow, careful palms open. May I? Emily hesitated. Then, shaking, she passed the boy into his arms. Caleb's head lolled against Vinny's chest. The contrast struck like a physical blow, the child's thin frame fragile as a bird cradled against the broad, powerful chest of a man whose tailored shirts cost more than a year's rent. Vinny felt the heat radiating through Caleb's pajamas, felt the rapid flutter of his heart against his own. Guilt surged through him, violent, nauseating. How many fevers had she fought alone? How many nights had she sat like this, terrified, powerless, while he slept in silk sheets, in penthouse suites overlooking the city he ruled? He turned to her. We need to get him to a hospital. Now. Emily shook her head, small, frantic. The clinic's closed. The emergency room is 40 minutes away. I don't have... Her voice cracked. I don't have insurance. They'll turn us away again. Vinny's jaw clenched. They won't turn us away. He moved, decisive, gentle, carrying Caleb toward the door. Emily followed, gathering the other boys with trembling hands. They stepped into the night. Vinny's Escalade waited at the curb, black gleaming engine already running. Marco stood beside it, door open. Vinny placed Caleb carefully in the back seat, buckling him in with hands that shook for the first time in years. Emily climbed in beside her son, pulling the other 3 boys close. The doors closed. The vehicle pulled away, smooth, silent, powerful. Inside, the heater blew warm air, scented faintly of leather and luxury. The boys stared wide-eyed at the soft glow of the dashboard, lights, the heated seats, the space that seemed impossibly vast compared to their tiny bedroom. Emily sat rigid, one hand on Caleb's chest, feeling every labored breath. Vinny turned from the front passenger seat. His eyes met hers in the dim light. I'm here, he said quietly. I'm right here. She looked away, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. The drive felt endless. Caleb's breathing grew worse, ragged, wheezing. Emily rocked him, whispering, Hold on, baby. Just hold on. Vinny's hands clenched into fists on his knees. The guilt inside him had become something living, clawing, tearing, screaming that he had let this happen. That he had left them to this. Halfway to the hospital, the gray sedan appeared again, shadowing them at a distance, headlights cutting through the dark. Marco glanced in the rearview mirror. Boss. Vinny's voice was ice. Shake them. Marco accelerated smoothly. The Escalade surged forward, powerful, controlled. The gray car followed for a moment, then fell back, disappearing into the night. Emily watched the exchange, fear flickering in her eyes. You can't outrun them forever, she whispered. Vinny turned to her. I don't have to, he said. I just have to keep you safe long enough to fix what I broke. She looked down at Caleb. The boy's eyes fluttered open. Daddy, he whispered, small, delirious. The word hung in the air like smoke. Vinny's breath caught painful audible. Emily froze. Then she leaned down, pressing her lips to Caleb's forehead. "He's here, baby," she whispered. "He's here now." The hospital lights appeared ahead, bright, sterile, promising. Vinny carried Caleb through the emergency doors fast, commanding the kind of presence that made nurses look twice. A doctor appeared almost immediately. Vinny spoke low, urgent. 4-year-old. High fever. Difficulty breathing. History of respiratory issues. No insurance yet, but I'm paying. Everything. Now. The doctor nodded, professional calm. They took Caleb away. Emily tried to follow. Her legs buckled. Vinny caught her arms strong, steady. She clung to him for one heartbeat, then pushed away, trembling. "I can't lose him," she whispered. "You won't," Vinny said. His voice cracked. "I swear to you, you won't." They waited in the hallway, Emily pacing, arms wrapped around herself. Vinny standing like a sentinel, eyes never leaving the doors where his son had disappeared. Hours passed. The boys slept on the waiting room chairs, curled against each other, small bodies exhausted. Vinny watched Emily. Watched the way she rocked on her heels, habit from years of standing in lines that never moved fast enough. Watched the way she pressed her knuckles to her mouth when the worry became too much. The love inside him had become unbearable, fierce, protective, all-consuming. It warred with the remorse that threatened to drown him. When the doctor finally emerged, face grave but calm, Emily froze. "Pneumonia," the doctor said. "Severe. He's stable now. Oxygen. Antibiotics. He'll need to stay a few days." Emily's knees gave way. Vinny caught her again. This time she did not pull away. She buried her face in his chest, silent, shaking sobs. Vinny held her as though she were the only thing anchoring him to the world. And in that moment, surrounded by the sterile smell of disinfectant, the quiet beeps of machines, the soft breathing of their sleeping sons, he made a vow. Silent, sacred, unbreakable. He would protect them. He would provide for them. He would burn every bridge, every deal, every threat, if it meant they would never know another night of cold hunger or fear. And he would do it one breath at a time, because the love that had awakened in him the moment he saw her in the rain had grown into something unbreakable, something that would either save them all or destroy him trying. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and quiet desperation. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale, unforgiving glow on the linoleum floor. Emily sat on the edge of a plastic chair, knees pressed together, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. The boys slept in a row beside her, Ethan with his head on Noah's shoulder. Liam curled into a tight ball, Caleb still in the pediatric ward, under bright lights and steady beeps. She had not moved in hours. Her eyes, red-rimmed, swollen, stared at the double doors where nurses came and went like silent ghosts. Every time they opened, her heart jumped, hope and terror colliding in her chest. Vinny stood a few feet away, back against the wall, arms crossed over his damp shirt. He had refused the blanket the nurse offered, refused the coffee, refused to sit. He simply watched Emily, watched every small tremor in her shoulders every time she pressed her lips together to keep from crying, every time she reached out to touch one of the sleeping boys as though reassuring herself they were still real. The doctor emerged at last. Dr. Patel, mid-40s, calm eyes behind thin glasses, approached with a clipboard and a measured expression. "Mrs. Harper," he began gently. Emily stood so quickly she swayed. Vinny was beside her in an instant, hand hovering at her elbow, not touching just there. "Caleb is stable," Dr. Patel continued. "The antibiotics are working. His oxygen levels are improving. We'll keep him overnight, maybe 2 days. But we need to talk about the bigger picture." Emily's breath caught. "Bigger picture." The doctor glanced at Vinny, then back to her. "We ran some preliminary blood work on all 4 boys while they were here. Standard protocol for siblings presenting with respiratory distress in undernourished children." He paused. Emily's voice came out small, almost polite, the voice she used when asking landlords for 1 more week. "What did you find?" Dr. Patel spoke carefully. "All 4 show signs of chronic malnutrition, low iron vitamin deficiencies, weakened immune response. Caleb's pneumonia was likely exacerbated by it. But there's more." He looked directly at Vinny. "We did a rapid genetic marker panel. The results are conclusive. The boys share identical paternal markers with you, Mr. Russo. They are yours. Biologically." The words landed softly. No thunder. No dramatic music. Just truth, quiet, final, devastating. Emily closed her eyes. She had known. Deep down, she had always known. But hearing it spoken aloud here, under hospital lights after years of carrying the secret alone, felt like the last thread of her old life snapping. Vinny's knees nearly buckled. He caught himself against the wall. The guilt that had been tearing at him since the moment he saw them in the rain now became something monstrous, clawing, screaming, refusing to be silenced. 4 sons, 4 sons who had grown up hungry, cold, afraid. Because of him. Because he had believed lies. Because he had walked away. He looked at Emily. She was crying now, silent tears slipping down her cheeks, shoulders shaking. He wanted to pull her into his arms. He wanted to drop to his knees and beg. Instead, he whispered, voice raw, broken, "I'm so sorry." Emily opened her eyes. She looked at him, really looked, saw the torment carved into every line of his face, saw the powerful man who commanded fear across cities now trembling before her. And something inside her cracked wider. Not forgiveness, not trust, but a raw, aching recognition he was hurting too. "Doctor," Patel cleared his throat gently, "there's more we need to discuss. All 4 boys show early signs of developmental stress, low weight for age, delayed bone density, subtle immune compromise. Caleb's heart rhythm showed occasional irregularities during the fever spike. We recommend full cardiology and nutritional follow-up. With proper care, consistent nutrition, regular medical access, the prognosis is excellent." Emily nodded, slow, numb. Vinny spoke, voice hoarse. "Whatever they need. Every test, every specialist. I'll cover it, all of it." The doctor nodded. "I'll arrange the paperwork." He left them alone in the corridor. Silence fell thick, heavy, full of unspoken grief. Emily sank back into the chair. Vinny crouched before her, slow, careful. "Emily," he said softly, "look at me." She did, eyes huge, lost. "I didn't know," he whispered, "but that doesn't change anything. I should have known. I should have been looking. I should have been here." She shook her head, small, exhausted. "I told myself you were dead," she said. "It was easier than believing you just didn't care." Vinny's face contorted. "I cared," he said. "Every day. I told myself I didn't. I told myself the lie was easier than the truth. But I cared, and I hate myself for it." Emily's breath hitched. "I can't let you buy them," she whispered. "I can't let you think money fixes this." "I'm not trying to buy them," he said immediately. "I'm trying to give them what I stole from them. Safety, warmth, food that doesn't come from a charity line, a mother who doesn't have to choose between eating and feeding them." Tears slipped down her cheeks again. "I don't know how to trust that," she said. "I know." He reached out slow, hesitant, and brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. She flinched, but she did not pull away. Vinny's heart shattered all over again. Outside the hospital, tires crunched on wet asphalt. Vinny's head turned sharply. Through the glass doors, he saw the gray sedan, same one from earlier, idling at the curb. His body tensed, instinctive, protective. He stood. "Stay here," he said quietly. Emily grabbed his sleeve. "Don't," he looked down at her. "I have to end this," he said. "For you. For them." She held on for 1 heartbeat longer. Then she let go. Vinny stepped outside. The rain had started again, light, steady. The sedan window lowered. Tommy Rossi leaned out. "You're making enemies, Vinny." Vinny's voice was calm, dangerously so. "I already have enough." Tommy smiled, thin, cold. "Family business waits for no one. Not even your little reunion." Vinny stepped closer. "Tell your father this. Anyone who comes near them answers to me. Personally." Tommy studied him. "You're choosing them over the life." Vinny's smile was slow, lethal. "I'm choosing them over everything." The window rose. The car pulled away. Vinny stood in the rain alone, soaked, heart pounding. Inside, Emily watched through the glass. When he returned, dripping, eyes burning, she stood. He stopped in front of her. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. She looked at him, really looked. Saw the man who had once promised her forever. Saw the man who had broken her. Saw the man who was trying brokenly, desperately to come back. And in the quiet of the hospital corridor, with 4 sleeping boys and 1 fighting for breath behind glass doors, Emily felt the first real crack in the wall she had built around her heart. Not wide. Not yet, but enough for light to slip through. She reached out, slow, trembling, and touched his hand. Just for a moment. Just long enough to feel his warmth. Then she let go. Vinny closed his eyes. The love inside him roared louder than ever, fierce, protective, all-consuming. He would fight for them. He would bleed for them. He would burn the world down, if it meant they would never know another night of cold hunger or fear. And he would start tonight. Dawn came slowly to the hospital parking lot, gray and reluctant, the kind of light that revealed every crack and stain without offering comfort. Emily stood beside the glass doors, arms wrapped tightly around herself, watching the first pale streak spread across the October sky of 2025. Caleb had stabilized through the night. The nurses had finally allowed her to sit beside his bed for an hour, holding his small hand while machines hummed their steady mechanical lullaby. The other 3 boys were still asleep in the waiting area, curled on plastic chairs beneath borrowed blankets that smelled faintly of bleach. She had not slept, not even closed her eyes. Every time she tried, the images returned: Caleb's fever-flushed cheeks, the hollows under his ribs, the way his cough had sounded like paper tearing. And beneath those images, deeper, older, the memory of nights when all 4 boys had cried from hunger while she pretended to eat so they wouldn't notice her plate was empty. Vinny had not left the hospital. He stood a respectful distance away, leaning against a concrete pillar, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, controlled, but Emily could hear the edge beneath it, the quiet menace of a man giving orders that would not be questioned. "Tell them the meeting is cancelled. Permanently. And if anyone asks why, tell them I said so." He ended the call. For a moment he simply stared at the ground, shoulders rigid, jaw clenched. Then he looked up and found her watching him. He crossed the distance between them in measured steps. She did not move away. "How is he?" he asked quietly. "Sleeping," she answered. Her voice was soft, almost polite, the careful tone she used when speaking to doctors, to caseworkers, to anyone who held power over her children's lives. "They say he'll be okay. With time, with medicine, with food." Vinny nodded once, slow, solemn. "I'll make sure he has all of it." Emily looked down at her hands, red cracked nails bitten short from months of nervous habit. "You can't just fix this with money," she whispered. "I know." He took one careful step closer. "But I can start by making sure you never have to choose between buying medicine and buying dinner again." She lifted her gaze. There were tears standing in her eyes again, silent, exhausted. "I'm scared," she admitted. The confession slipped out like a secret she had guarded too long. "I'm scared of letting you in. I'm scared of what happens when you leave again. I'm scared that if I start to hope, it will break me when it ends." Vinny's throat worked. The remorse inside him had become a living thing, clawing at his chest, screaming that he had earned every word of her fear. "I'm not leaving," he said. His voice cracked on the last syllable. "Not this time. Not ever again." Before she could answer, his phone vibrated again. He glanced at the screen. Sophia's name flashing in sharp white letters. His expression hardened. He answered. "Sophia." Emily watched his face change, saw the way his jaw tightened, the way his free hand curled into a fist at his side. Sophia's voice carried through the receiver, sharp, furious, loud enough to be heard in the quiet corridor. "Where are you? You disappeared last night. The Morettis are furious. They're saying you're backing out of the waterfront deal. What the hell is going on, Vinny?" Vinny's gaze never left Emily's face. "I'm where I need to be," he said quietly. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Then Sophia's laugh, short, bitter. "You're throwing everything away. For what? Some sad little family in a dying town. You think they'll ever understand who you really are?" Vinny's voice dropped low, final. "They already understand more than you ever will." Another pause. Then Sophia's voice turned cold. "If you walk away from me, from this life, don't expect me to wait. I won't be the woman who stands in line behind children in guilt." Vinny exhaled once, slow, steady. "I'm not asking you to." He ended the call. The silence that followed felt enormous. Emily stared at him, eyes wide, breath shallow. "You just..." She swallowed. "You just ended it. Over the phone." Vinny looked down at the device in his hand as though it were something foreign. "I ended it the moment I saw you in the rain," he said softly. "Everything after that was just paperwork." Emily's knees trembled. She reached out, instinctive, unsteady, and gripped the back of a nearby chair to keep from falling. Vinny stepped forward, slow, careful. "Emily." She shook her head, small, frantic. "You can't just dismantle your life for us. You don't know what it's like. You don't know how hard it is. How humiliating it is to stand in food lines, to count every penny, to lie awake, wondering if tomorrow you'll have to tell your children there's nothing to eat." Her voice broke. "I've worn the same coat for 4 winters. I've patched the soles of their shoes with cardboard. I've gone to bed hungry so they wouldn't." And tears slipped down her cheeks. "You show up with your expensive car and your expensive coat, and you think you can just fix it." Vinny felt the words like blows. Each one landed deeper than the last. He wanted to argue, wanted to tell her he understood, wanted to promise the world. Instead, he said the only truth he had left: "I can't fix the past. I can't give back the years I stole from you. But I can stand here every day, every night, until you believe I'm not going anywhere." Emily looked at him, really looked. Saw the powerful man who had once walked away without looking back. Saw the man who now stood in front of her, rain-soaked, exhausted eyes burning with remorse so deep it seemed to hollow him out. And something inside her shifted again. Not wide. Not yet. But enough for the wall to tremble. She whispered, voice small, trembling, "I need boundaries. Vinny nodded immediately. Name them. No sudden moves, she said. No decisions over my head. No promises you can't keep. No danger near my boys. Ever. Vinny's throat closed. I swear it. She studied him, searching his face for lies, for weakness, for the man who had once broken her heart. Then softly, you can come tomorrow. You can bring groceries. You can sit with Caleb while I sleep for an hour, but you don't get to play daddy yet. Not until they're ready. Not until I'm ready. Vinny exhaled, shaky, relieved. Thank you. Outside, another vehicle slowed at the curb, sleek black windows tinted. Vinny's head turned sharply. He recognized the plates. Rossi family. Again. He stepped in front of Emily, instinctive, protective. Stay inside, he said quietly. She grabbed his sleeve. Don't go out there alone. Vinny looked down at her hand on his arm, small, trembling, but holding on. For the first time in 8 years, someone cared whether he came back. He covered her hand with his gentle, careful. I'll be right back. He stepped outside. The black car window lowered. A voice called low, mocking. You're playing a dangerous game, Vinny. Vinny's smile was cold. I've been playing dangerous games since I was 16. This one I intend to win. The window rose. The car pulled away. Vinny stood in the gray dawn, heart pounding, soul burning. Inside, Emily watched him through the glass. When he returned unharmed, steady, she met his eyes. And in that quiet moment between the beeping machines and the sleeping children, the first fragile thread of trust began to weave itself between them. Thin, uncertain, but real. The hospital discharged Caleb just before noon on the third day. The boy clung to Emily's neck as she carried him down the corridor, his small arms wrapped, tight face still pale, but eyes brighter than they had been in weeks. The antibiotics had done their work. The fever had broken. The oxygen mask was gone, but the fragility remained visible in the way his ribs showed beneath the thin cotton of his hospital gown, in the way he tired after only a few steps. Vinny walked beside them, carrying the small plastic bag of discharge papers and prescriptions. He had not slept more than an hour at a time since they arrived. His shirt, still the same one from the rain-soaked night, was wrinkled now, sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms corded with tension. The gold watch on his wrist caught the hallway lights, a quiet reminder of the world he had begun to dismantle for them. Outside, the October air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. Vinny's Escalade waited at the curb, polished, imposing engine already running. Marco stood beside it, scanning the parking lot with professional calm. Emily hesitated at the doors. She looked at the vehicle, sleek, black, expensive, and then down at her own worn sneakers, the soles so thin she could feel the cold concrete through them. Vinny noticed. He spoke softly without pressure. I can call a cab if you'd rather. She shook her head, small, uncertain. No, it's fine. She stepped forward. The boys climbed into the back seat, wide-eyed, touching the leather upholstery as though it might vanish if they pressed too hard. Emily settled Caleb on her lap, wrapping her arms around him protectively. Vinny slid into the front passenger seat. Marco pulled away smoothly. They had traveled less than 3 blocks when the first warning came. A black SUV appeared in the side mirror, too close, too fast. Marco's eyes flicked to the rear view. Boss. Vinny's body tensed, instinctive, lethal. Floor it. The Escalade surged forward. Emily's arms tightened around Caleb. What's happening? Vinny turned in the seat. Stay down. All of you. The boys froze, eyes huge. The pursuing vehicle accelerated, closing the gap. Vinny's voice was calm, dangerously so. Take the next left. Hard. Marco obeyed. The Escalade swung into a narrow side street, tires squealing, body leaning sharply. Behind them, the black SUV followed. Emily pressed her cheek to Caleb's hair, whispering, It's okay, baby. It's okay. But her voice shook. Vinny reached back, slow, careful, and placed his hand over hers on the seat. I won't let anything happen to you, he said. I swear it. The words were quiet. They were also a vow carved in blood. The SUV behind them accelerated again, ramming distance now. Marco took another sharp turn. The street narrowed, old warehouses on one side, chain-link fence on the other. The pursuing vehicle swerved too late. Its front bumper clipped the fence. Metal screamed. The SUV spun once, twice, then slammed into a rusted dumpster with a sickening crunch. Smoke rose from the hood. Marco kept driving, steady, controlled. Vinny exhaled once, sharp, shaky. He turned to Emily. Are you hurt? She shook her head, eyes wide, breathing shallow. No. But they... Her voice cracked. They were trying to. Vinny's jaw clenched. I know. He looked at the boys. All 4 stared back at him, silent, terrified. Ethan spoke first, small voice trembling. Are they gonna come back? Vinny reached out, slow, gentle, and placed a hand on the boy's knee. Not if I can help it. The Escalade slowed. Marco glanced in the mirror. Clear for now, boss. Vinny nodded. Take us to the safe house on River Road. No stops. Emily looked at him, fear and confusion warring in her eyes. Safe house. Vinny met her gaze. I have places no one knows about. You'll be safe there until I end this. She swallowed. And then I finish what I started, he said quietly. I walk away from the life. For good. The safe house was modest by Vinny's standards. A single-story brick ranch on a quiet street outside Milford, surrounded by mature trees. Inside, clean carpets, warm lights, a kitchen stocked with food Emily had only seen in magazines. The boys stared, awed silent, as Vinny led them through the front door. Emily stood in the entryway, clutching Caleb, taking in the sight of a refrigerator that hummed instead of rattling counters free of cracks, heat that didn't hiss through ancient radiators. It felt wrong. It felt like trespassing. Vinny watched her, saw the way her shoulders hunched, the way her fingers tightened on Caleb's shirt. He spoke softly. It's just for a few days, until Caleb's stronger, until I can make sure no one follows us again. She looked at him, eyes huge, lost. I don't belong here, she whispered. Vinny's chest ached. You belong anywhere you feel safe, he said. And right now that's here. She walked slowly into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator. Milk, eggs, fresh fruit, bread that wasn't stale, juice in bright cartons. Her hand trembled as she touched the carton of orange juice like it might disappear if she pressed too hard. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent, unstoppable. Vinny stepped closer. He did not touch her. He simply stood there, watching the woman who had survived on nothing, now staring at abundance like it was a dream she was afraid to believe. I can't pay for this, she whispered. You don't have to. She turned to him, eyes swimming. I don't know how to accept this, Vinny. I don't know how to accept you. He nodded, slow, aching. I know. Outside, a car slowed at the end of the street. Vinny's head turned. He moved to the window, silent, watchful. A different vehicle this time, gray, unmarked. He recognized the driver. Frankie Moretti. Again. Vinny's voice was low. Stay inside. Emily grabbed his arm. Don't go out there. He looked down at her hand, small, trembling, holding on. I have to. She shook her head, frantic. They'll hurt you. Vinny covered her hand with his gentle, steady. They won't get the chance. He stepped outside. Frankie leaned against the hood of his car, arms crossed, smile thin. You're making a lot of people nervous, Vinny. Vinny stopped 5 feet away. Good. Frankie laughed short, cold. You think you can just walk away. You think the families forget. Vinny's voice was calm, final. I'm not asking them to forget. I'm telling them to stay away. Frankie studied him. You've gone soft. Vinny's smile was slow. I've gone clear. Frankie pushed off the hood. This ends one way, Vinny. Vinny stepped closer. Then let's make it quick. Silence stretched, tense, electric. Frankie stared at him for a long moment. Then he nodded once. We'll see. He got into his car, drove away. Vinny stood in the driveway, heart pounding, soul burning. Inside, Emily waited, boys clustered around her, eyes wide. When he stepped back through the door, she met his gaze. And in that quiet moment between the warmth of the safe house and the cold threat outside, Emily reached out. Her fingers brushed his. Just once, just long enough to feel his warmth. Then she let go. But the touch lingered, and the love between them, fierce, wounded, unbreakable, burned brighter than ever. The safe house on River Road was too quiet after the hospital. The kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums and makes every small sound feel like a warning. Emily moved through the unfamiliar kitchen with the careful steps of someone who expects the floor to give way beneath her. She opened cabinets, slowly, afraid the hinges might creak too loudly, afraid the abundance might disappear if she acknowledged it too openly. Canned soup with whole vegetables. Boxes of cereal with bright cartoon characters the boys had only seen on television. Fresh apples that smelled like fall instead of the bruised ones she usually found at the bottom of the discount bin. Her fingers trembled as she lifted one apple, turning it in the light. It was perfect red, unblemished, heavy in her palm. She pressed it to her cheek for a moment, eyes closing, then set it down again as though it had burned her. Vinny watched from the doorway. He had changed into dry clothes, simple, dark sweater, expensive jeans that still carried the faint scent of new fabric. But he looked smaller somehow. Stripped of the armor of tailored coats and gleaming watches, he seemed almost ordinary. Almost, he spoke softly, careful not to startle her. You don't have to cook tonight. There's a meal service I can call. Whatever you want. Emily shook her head, small, automatic. I need to do something with my hands. She needed normal. She needed proof that her fingers still remembered how to provide, even here in this place that felt like a beautiful lie. Vinny nodded once. He retreated to the living room, giving her space. The boys explored cautiously, touching the soft couch cushions, peering into rooms with actual closets, staring at the flat-screen television like it might speak to them. Ethan stayed closest to his mother, watching her with worried eyes that were far too old for 7 years. Outside, the first snow of the season had begun to fall, light, hesitant flakes that melted the moment they touched the warm driveway. Vinny's phone vibrated on the coffee table. He glanced at the screen. His consigliere Anthony Tony Bellini, the man who had stood beside him for 15 years. The man who knew every secret, every weakness, every plan. Vinny answered. Tony. The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. You're making waves, boss. Big ones. Vinny's grip tightened on the phone. I told everyone I needed time. Yeah. And while you're playing house, certain people are getting impatient. Deals are stalling. Money's sitting. You know how that ends. Vinny's voice dropped low, dangerous. I'll handle it when I'm ready. A long pause. Then Tony's tone shifted, almost gentle. I always said you had a heart under all that steel. Just didn't think you'd let it bleed you out. Vinny closed his eyes. Careful, Tony. The line went dead. Vinny stared at the phone for a long moment. Something cold and certain settled in his gut. He knew betrayal when he smelled it. He moved to the window. Outside snow fell thicker now, blanketing the quiet street. A black sedan idled at the far end, lights off engine barely audible. Vinny's jaw clenched. He stepped outside. The cold bit through his sweater immediately. He walked straight toward the car, unhurried, deliberate. The driver's window lowered as he approached. Tony. Not Frankie. Not some hired muscle. Tony. The man who had carried his secrets. The man he had trusted with his life. Tony looked up at him, expression unreadable. You shouldn't be here, Vinny said quietly. Tony shrugged. Someone had to make sure you didn't do something stupid. Vinny crouched beside the window, eye level now. You sold me out. It wasn't a question. Tony's gaze flickered just once. They offered a lot of money, and a bigger chair. Vinny's laugh was soft, broken. You were already my second. Seconds, not first. Silence stretched between them, sharp, final. Vinny stood slowly. I gave you everything, he said. Everything. Tony looked away. Yeah. And you were gonna throw it all away for a woman and 4 kids who don't even know your name. Vinny's voice dropped to a whisper. They know my name now. He reached into his pocket. Tony tensed. Vinny pulled out a small flash drive, black, unmarked. Everything I have on the families, every account, every deal, every name. It's all here. Tony stared. Vinny dropped the drive into Tony's lap. Take it. Give it to them. Tell them I'm done. Tony's hand closed around it slowly. You're really walking. Vinny looked back toward the house, warm lights glowing through the curtains, silhouettes of 4 small boys moving inside. I already walked, he said. Years ago. I'm just finally going home. Tony stared at him for a long moment. Then he nodded once. The window rose. The sedan pulled away. Vinny stood in the falling snow alone, exposed, strangely light. He turned back toward the house. Emily stood in the doorway watching him. She had seen everything. She stepped aside as he entered. The warmth of the house wrapped around him immediately, smell of soup simmering, sound of boys laughing quietly in the next room. Emily closed the door behind him. She looked up, eyes huge, shimmering. You gave them everything, she whispered. Vinny nodded. I gave them what they wanted. So they'll leave us alone. She studied him, searching his face. You could have fought. You could have kept it all. Vinny reached out slow, careful, and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. I don't want it all, he said. I want this. The air between them thickened. Snow melted in his hair, dripping onto the hardwood floor. Emily's breath caught. She took one small step closer, then another, until there was almost no space left. Vinny's heart thundered, violent, desperate. He whispered, voice raw, Emily. She lifted her hand, trembling, and laid it against his chest, right over his heart. She felt it racing. She felt the tremor that ran through his entire body, and something inside her, something that had been locked away for 8 long years, finally shattered. She rose on her toes. He bent. Their mouths met, soft at first, tentative tasting of salt and snow and years of longing. Then the dam broke. The kiss turned fierce, hungry, desperate, consuming. Vinny's arms wrapped around her, strong, protective, reverent. Emily's fingers curled into his sweater, clinging as though he might disappear if she let go. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Tears slipped down his. They kissed like people drowning, clutching, gasping, refusing to let go. When they finally parted, foreheads pressed together, breathing ragged, Emily whispered, "I never stopped loving you." Vinny closed his eyes, pain and joy colliding in his chest. "I never deserved you," he said. She shook her head. "You're here now." He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. "I'll spend the rest of my life earning the right to stay." Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft, silent, covering every trace of the past. Inside, 4 small boys slept safe, warm, loved. And in the quiet kitchen, 2 broken people began slowly, painfully, fiercely to heal. The love between them burned brighter than ever, passionate, intense, unbreakable. It would face more storms, it would face more threats, but it would not break, not again. The snow continued to fall through the night, blanketing the quiet street outside the safe house in soft, forgiving white. Inside, the warmth of the radiator hummed steadily, a sound so foreign to Emily that every few minutes she paused, just to listen, just to remember what safety felt like. The boys had fallen asleep in the guest bedroom upstairs, 4 small bodies tucked beneath thick comforters they had never owned before. Their breathing was even now peaceful in a way it had not been for years. Emily stood at the kitchen window, arms wrapped around herself, watching the flakes drift past the glass. She wore one of Vinny's old sweatshirts, far too large sleeves hanging past her fingertips, but it smelled faintly of him. Clean cotton, expensive cologne, and something deeper, something uniquely his. She had not intended to keep it on. She had told herself she would change back into her own worn clothes, the ones that carried the familiar scent of hardship and survival. Yet here she stood, wrapped in his warmth, feeling both protected and terrified by it. Vinny entered the room quietly. He had showered hair, still damp, dressed in a simple black long-sleeve shirt and dark jeans. No watch tonight. No cufflinks, no armor of wealth. Just a man who looked exhausted down to his bones. He stopped several feet away. "I checked the perimeter," he said softly. "No cars, no shadows. We're clear for tonight." Emily nodded, small, almost imperceptible. Silence settled between them again. Not uncomfortable, just heavy with everything unsaid. Vinny spoke first. "I spoke to my lawyer this afternoon. Everything is being transferred. The accounts, the properties, the legitimate businesses. I'm putting them into a trust for the boys. For you. If anything happens to me, don't," Emily whispered. Her voice cracked. "Don't talk like that." He stepped closer, slow, careful. "I have to. Because I need you to know. You'll never be helpless again. Never have to stand in a food line wondering if there will be anything left. Never have to choose between medicine and rent. Never have to watch your children go to bed hungry." Tears filled her eyes. She looked away. "I don't want your money, Vinny. I'm not giving you money," he said gently. "I'm giving you what I should have given you 8 years ago. Security, peace, a chance to breathe." She turned back to him, eyes shimmering. "And what about you? What happens when the families come for you? What happens when they decide you're a liability?" Vinny's jaw tightened. "I'm meeting them tomorrow, face to face. I'm telling them I'm out. Completely. No deals. No half measures. If they want war, they'll have to come through me." Emily's breath caught. "You'll get hurt. Maybe." He reached out slowly and brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "But I'd rather bleed every day for the rest of my life than let you bleed alone for one more night." The words landed softly. They landed deeply. Emily closed her eyes. She felt the old walls trembling again, cracking wider this time. She felt the love she had buried so long ago rising like a tide she could no longer hold back. She opened her eyes, looked at him, really looked. Saw the powerful man who had once walked away. Saw the man who had returned broken, remorseful, willing to burn everything for them. And in that moment the last barrier shattered. She stepped forward. He met her halfway. Their kiss was gentle at first, tentative, healing. Then it deepened, fierce, desperate, full of 8 years of longing. Vinny's arms wrapped around her, strong, protective, reverent. Emily clung to him, fingers curling into his shirt, tears mixing with their kiss. When they parted, foreheads pressed together, breathing ragged, she whispered, "I love you. I never stopped." Vinny closed his eyes, pain and joy colliding in his chest. "I don't deserve you," he said again. She shook her head. "Love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing. Every day. Again and again." He pulled her closer. "I choose you. I choose them. I choose this life, whatever it costs." Months passed. Winter gave way to spring. The boys grew stronger. Caleb's cough faded completely. Their cheeks filled out, their laughter filled the house. Vinny kept his promise. He met the families. He walked away. There were threats. There were tense nights when headlights swept past the windows. There were moments when Emily woke in terror, certain someone would come for them. But Vinny stood between them and the darkness every time. He built something new. A small construction company, legitimate, honest, focused on rebuilding homes for families who had lost everything. He hired men who had once worked for him in the shadows, gave them second chances, steady paychecks, dignity. He never raised his voice. He never raised a hand. He simply showed up every day, every night, proving with actions what words could never fully express. One spring afternoon, Emily stood in the backyard of the modest house they had bought together. Nothing grand, just safe, warm theirs. The boys ran across the grass, laughing, chasing each other free in a way they had never been. Vinny came up behind her. He slipped his arms around her waist. She leaned back against him, easy, natural. He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I love you," he whispered. She turned in his arms, looked up at him, eyes shining. "I love you too." They kissed slow, deep, full of quiet certainty. Love, they had learned, did not care about skin color. It did not care about wealth or poverty. It cared only about choice, about showing up, about staying. Knowledge is the light that guides us through darkness. Lesson teaches us that redemption is not given, it is earned. Education of the heart shows us compassion, has no boundaries. Knowledge reminds us that true strength lies in humility. Lesson reveals that love can heal even the deepest wounds. Education of the soul proves that wealth means nothing without kindness. Knowledge opens our eyes to the humanity in every person. Lesson shows us that second chances are sacred. Education teaches that compassion bridges every divide. Knowledge proves that real change begins within. To everyone watching this video, may you be blessed with good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. Take care of yourselves and the people you love. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the YouTube channel Alex Truths, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. New stories full of heart and hope drop every day. Tell me in the comments, how did this story make you feel? Does it remind you of anything in your own life? Share your emotions. I read every comment, and I want to hear what moves you deepest. Thank you for being here. See you in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.